Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you very much for Gideon Gatsuyani and family, and for Rabbi Shimel and family for preparing the shiurim very nicely. The last time, just to recap, we spoke about a beautiful story that happened to the Alter Rebbe when he went to a city, I believe it was the city of Shvincian, which was a Misnagdim city, and but they were already getting, they warmed up a little bit to Chassidus, and Alter Rebbe came there not to have a debate, but to spend some time there. In Shvincian they already had Chassidim, and the city invited the Alter Rebbe to come visit the city of Shvincian. He was there for 3 weeks, two weeks, which was 3 Shabbosim. Came down Friday, Parshas Erev, Parshas Noach, and this was the year Tov Mem Zayin, which was 1786, going to 87. That is the beginning of the winter of 87. And a very beautiful story happened when there was an older Yid there who was 93 years old, and he got up in the shul to speak, and he told how he used to be the head of the whole opposition to fight against the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid, which was a fact. He was very wealthy and a very big scholar. And then one day he had a dream. The Baal Shem Tov asked him, "Why are you fighting against me? You never even investigated what the truth is." And that's when he stopped. 2 of his grandchildren became Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe blessed him. And now in Shul, this is the year 1786, he announced a Shechianu with Hashem's name. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, the whole Shechianu, he said, for seeing a great, true scholar and Goyin, a genius, and a Talmid Chacham, who's the Alter Rebbe, who had brought thousands of Yidden closer to the Eibishter. And then this announcement that he made had a tremendous effect, and many people became Chassidim because of that too. So what are we discussing now in the history of the Alter Rebbe is that we're getting very close to when the Alter Rebbe finally accepted the leadership, in other words, to become Rebbe officially, which was the next year, Tov Kuf Mem Ches approximately. So we're talking about quite a few years. The Alter Rebbe was leading the Chassidim all over Russia, having a tremendous effect on the Misnagdim people to become Chassidim, but it did not yet officially accept being Rebbe. So in this part of the history, there's a lot of interesting things that happened, and you think about it, that Alter Rebbe officially did not accept being Rebbe yet, officially, and this story that happened to Reb Shlomo Rafals was the person's name in the city of Shvincian. So I told everyone last week that there was something that happened just a week before the Alter Rebbe went to Shvincian, and we'll tell the story now. A week before the Alter Rebbe went to Shvincian was Sukkot. The Alter Rebbe went right after Sukkot, Tuesday after Sukkot, and he came to Shvincian on Friday, and this beautiful thing happened with Alter Rebbe. It was a tremendous Kiddush Hashem and Kiddush Hashem Chassidim, where the Reb Shlomo Rafal spoke up. But a week before, when it was Sukkot, it was October, so October 9th approximately was the first day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and October 13th, which was a Friday, was Hishayna Rabbo that year. That year, this is 1786, in October, the winter started very, very early. Chol HaMoed Sukkot on October 9th, the first snowstorm came to Liozna. So much snow fell that they had to constantly remove the snow to be able to make a bracha in the sukkah and to eat in the sukkah, because the sukkah became packed with snow. That year, Shmini Atzeres, actually, when the Alter Rebbe still ate in the sukkah, as the meaning of Chassidim is and the meaning of Chabad, so there was so much snow that they had to tell the goy. The Alter Rebbe said they should tell the goy, whose name was Kunze. And they went and told him a story. They said that there's snow on the sukkah and they can't eat in the sukkah. And he had to understand himself that he has to go and clear it off, which he did. And that's when Alter Rebbe made Kiddush and Shmini Atzeres. But let's go step by step. It was a very, very cold Sukkot with lots of snow. Bechlal, that winter was a very powerful winter. This is before they started keeping records of weather in whether it's NOAA or NASA, which started in 1880. This was 1786. So this is interesting things that how the Yidden kept weather because of the stories they kept. In Tanakh, we have a few times that they kept the weather. They said there was a drought for 3 years, and then the Navi Elisha or the Navi Eliyahu, and then the rain came and a cloud came, all these things. People never thought of recording weather except for in Torah, you find it that way. So in this case, who told this whole story? This whole story was told by Reb Pinchas Reizes, who was there himself. He was an eyewitness to this entire story. And he told over this story 30 to 40 years later. And we all know that Reb Pinchas Reizes was a chayzer. He would repeat the Alter Rebbe's Maimarim, which means he had photographic memory. And when he told this story, and he named people there, he names 20 Jungelite, 20 people's names, and from what cities they were. And this was later on written down by the Frierdiker Rebbe with every single detail. Says Reb Pinchas Reizes that in the sukkah that year, they had to sit with fur coats and special boots that are worn, boots with inlay, with whatever they call it, inlays, insulation, because it was so cold in Liozner that year. Most of the Hasidim that came to the Alter Rebbe, remember the Alter Rebbe didn't officially accept being Rebbe yet officially. The Chassidim had such love to the Alter Rebbe, it was mind-boggling. So the Chassidim, most of the Chassidim that came to Liozne for Simchas Torah that year became sick from the weather. They got colds. Many of them had frostbite on their hands and their feet. They were frostbitten. That means some of the fingers didn't work because it became so frozen. Says Reb Pinchas Reizes that Hayshayna Rabbo in the morning, the Alter Rebbe every year used to command the Gaboim, or a certain Gabai, to take out all the Sefer Torahs from the Aron Kodesh and to roll them to the correct places for the next 3 days, the next 2 days of Yom Tov, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. The Alter Rebbe was very, very meticulous. Everything should be exactly done the way it's supposed to be done. The Sefer Torahs, every Sefer Torah had to have the place where it's sewed together, the pages, the parchment, had to be right in the center between the two Eitz Chaims, between the two handles of the Sefer Torah. Reb Michal the Shamish, he was the Shamish by the Alter Rebbe. Reb Michal was very, very careful. Every detail the Alter Rebbe told him to do, and everything in shul in general, Reb Michal the Shamish was very strict and very careful that everything should be done exact and calmly and quietly. The Seder was, according to what the Alter Rebbe would choose, the Alter Rebbe would choose one chassid of his to be the one in charge over the Shamish and the many Yungalites, some young married people that chassidim that helped the Shamish. One person was in charge of everything, and that person had to come and report to the Alter Rebbe in his room when everything was done and taken care of. That year, says Pinchas Reizes, I had the schus. He was the one who had the merit that the Alter Rebbe gave him the shlichus of being mashgiach, that everything is done in order. As we said before, says Pinchas Reizes, the kviyas, the seder, the calendar that year was a Shayna Rabbah, was on Friday. I checked the calendar; it was October 13th. The Alter Rebbe was very, very happy after I came and told him that everything that the Alter Rebbe gave me in a shlichus was fulfilled completely. Alter Rebbe became happy, and as I was standing there, I mentioned to the Alter Rebbe, he says, there are many chassidim that came here that are very sick with high fever because of the weather. The Alter Rebbe then sat for a few minutes, for a certain amount of time, with his holy head in his hands, in a very big dveikus. That means he was concentrating something very deeply. When he opened his eyes, the Alter Rebbe used to speak always with a niggin, with a sing-song. He said to Reb Pinchas Reizes, the Torah says about the Torah, in Dvarim, by the way, towards the end, in Hazinu, I believe, the Torah says about the Torah, Eish dos lomoi, that the Torah is a fire that came from Hashem, the fire from Hashem. And there's different midrashim what it means, but basically that the Eibishter calls the Torah fire. Said the Alter Rebbe these words: tonight is Simchas Torah. That says they should bring everyone to Hakofis because fire consumes fire, and the fire of Simchas Torah will consume the fire of their fever, burning up of the fever. Sounds great. Alter Rebbe said a beautiful thing. Well, let's watch how the Chassidim behaved. Says Pinchas raises in his story, he goes back and he says, in Lyozne, which was Alter Rebbe's city, but there was still a lot of different Yidden that lived there. Two people in Lyozne were older Yidden who were Misnagdim. And although they had tremendous respect for the Alter Rebbe, but they were complete Misnagdim. Against, they were opposing the whole idea of Chassidus, or miracles, or Rebbes, and so on. One was called Reb Isaac Mechadish, the other one was called Reb Naftali Zohir. What were their nicknames about? Reb Isaac always, when they used to sit and learn, Reb Isaac used to say, Baruch Hashem, today I had a chidush. A chidush means an invention, a novel idea in the Gemara or in Halacha. Everything, he would always say, today I had this and this chidush. He meant it. He was a real Ben Torah, a real scholar. And therefore they nicknamed him, I guess his friends maybe, Reb Isaac Mechadish. Reb Naftali, on the other hand, was also a great scholar, but he used to always boast about how he's careful in his eating, what he eats. He's careful what he speaks. He's careful where he looks. Zohir in Hebrew means a person who is careful. So they gave him a nickname, Reb Naftali Zohir. That's what Pinchas Reis is telling the story. These are two people, Reb Isaac and Reb Naftali, were already older, and when they were younger, they were Talmidim of the famous yeshiva in those days in a city called Smilevich. Over there was a Goin, a tremendous genius, a Jewish Talmid Chacham, called Reb Shilem Yudel, who actually had Gilui Eliyahu quite often. It wasn't a chassid, it was just a great Talmid Chacham. And he brought up many great Talmidim who were geniuses. So Reb Isaac and Reb Naftali learned in that yeshiva of Smilevich when this tzaddik, Reb Shilem Yudel, was already old and he was already blind. So who did they hear shiurim from? Who did they hear lectures from? Not from this Reb Shilem Yudel himself, who was such an older person. The shiurim were given over by his second son-in-law of this Reb Shilem Yudel, who was called Reb Shimon Eliyahu, the Goin, or the Ilui. The Ilui means the genius, another form of genius, of the city of Drutzen. These are all cities in Lithuania. Reb Pinchas Reis interjects in the story and he says like this: my father, Reb Pinchas' father, who himself was a great Misnagid at first, and his name was Reb Henech, from Shklov. He says, my father, when he was a Bacher, he also learned by this Jew, by this Shimon Eliyahu, the genius from Drutzen. And at that time, this Shimon Eliyahu was already 20 years considered the oldest Rosh Yeshiva in Smilevich. And my father, Reb Chanoich Henich Shik, said that when this Reb Eliyahu, Reb Shimon Eliyahu, used to say a chidush, used to say a lecture, a shir in Gemara, it was so sweet that people didn't feel time go by. And when he used to say a pilpul, which is in depth, they felt how the logic that he would say is hovering in the air. And the depth that they had to involve themselves, the students, caused them headaches sometimes. When my father, this is Reb Pinchas Reis interjecting in the story, when my father, Reb Chanoich Henech, became close to the Alter Rebbe, he didn't become a chassid, but he became very close to the Alter Rebbe. He was convinced that the Alter Rebbe is a great tzaddik. He would say these words: I am sure that if my Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Shimon Eliyahu, that genius from Drutzen, would have heard the depth of the chassidus of the Alter Rebbe, he 100% would have become a chassid, said Reb Chanoich Henech, who used to be a Misnagid but realized how great the Alter Rebbe was. And if my Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Shimon Eliyahu, would have put his talents in to learning Chassidus and explain it with his smooth tongue, all the Misnagdim Gedolim would become Chassidim, said Reb Chanoich Henech. Now back to the story. This Reb Isaac Mechadish, who once learned by this guy in Smilevich, was from the city of Upzug, a city somewhere in Lithuania. And Reb Naftali, his friend, Reb Naftali Zoyer, was from Kachanov. Both of them came to Liozne already 50 years earlier. This is 1786. 50 years earlier they came to Liozne, these two. And they became, how come? They became chassanim, they became engaged to women, to kalas, who were from rich people in Liozne, rich business people. And since they got married, 50 years, all they did was sit and learn all the time. This was a normal thing in those days. Baruch Hashem, today also there's a lot of Yidden who sit and learn all their lives. But they were totally involved in learning. And when the Alter Rebbe came the first time to Liozne, the Alter Rebbe was in Vitebsk. He was born in Liozne, or near Liozne, but then he lived in Vitebsk. Then he came to Liozne, and he said a pilpul, that means he gave a shir. Reb Isaac Mechadish was so excited, and him and his friend Reb Naftali said, from the day that we left the yeshiva in Smilevich, and the great Ilu of Drutzen Reb Shimon Eliyahu gave a shir twice a week, we never heard such a pilpul like the Alter Rebbe's. So they became very impressed with the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe settled in Liozne, finally, they used to go in all the time to the Alter Rebbe to ask questions in different halachas, and the Alter Rebbe every time caused them to get very excited. In that time, the inhabitants of Liozne, like in all the other cities over there, were Misnagdim. They behaved like the Misnagdim, yet, in spite of all this, they were not the same as the Misnagdim of Vilna, Minsk, Brisk, and Slutsk, which is really the Lithuanian cities with the strongholds of the Misnagdim. In Liozne, they were Misnagdim, but not the same. Why is that? So Pinchas Reis explained because they were older people in Vitebsk and Mogilev who said, and this is near, not too far from Liozne, they used to tell that people used to pass by years before, maybe 50, 100 years, 50, 70 years ago, people, wanderers, travelers used to travel by these cities of Vitebsk and Mogilev and Liozne, I guess, and they used to go into the Misnagdim and start telling stories about a great tzaddik who is in the area of the county of Podolia, who's working very hard to help Yidden Begashmis, and he makes miracles. And the people telling the stories amongst them were geniuses and scholars, and they respected them, the Misnagdim. They didn't know who they were. They were people who knew Shas by heart. And they used to say that this tzaddik in Podolia, who was obviously Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, is doing miracles like the Tanoim and Amoraim in the days of the Gemara. At that time, says Pinchas Reis, they didn't know who these wanderers, travelers were. But by us, when we came to the Alter Rebbe in Pinchas's times, all the people had figured out already that these were Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, who were hidden tzaddikim, who used to travel all over the countryside and tell people about the great miracles and how the Baal Shem Tov is teaching Yidden how to serve the Eibishter. This lasted for quite a few years, these travelers, and then, unfortunately, all these rabbinic organizations from the Lithuanian cities came out with excommunications, isurim, forbidden to let anybody learn or follow the Baal Shem Tov. The simple Bnei Torah, they were scholars, but they didn't know what's going on in the world. They loved listening to the stories of these travelers. And they couldn't understand why are people making isurim about the Baal Shem Tov and forbidden and so on. And for that reason, he says, because they already were open a little bit to the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, so in the areas of Vitebsk and Mogilev, they were Yerushalayim and they were Bnei Torah, but they became much easier to go over to become Hasidim, and even those who remained Misnagdim were not the same as Brisk and Slutsk and Shklov and Vilna, where they were really, really extreme Misnagdim. When the Alter Rebbe came back from Mezrich to Liozne for the first time, it might have been the second time that it was in Mezrich, so Isaac and Naftali, we know the famous question, they came over to the Alter Rebbe, who they respected as a genius, as a scholar. Why did you have to go so far to Mezrich if you could? It's Bittul Torah. You could have gone to Vilna, which is much closer to Liozne. And over there, you could have gotten all your questions in Torah. You could have clarified everything by the great Goin, Reb Elinke. Reb Eliyahu was the name of the Vilna Goin, but the older Misnagdim people who were older than the Vilna Goin, most probably, would call him Reb Elinke, respectfully. But it was like an endearing name. Not Reb Eliyahu, but Reb Elinke. So the Alter Rebbe answered to Reb Isaac and Naphtali. In Vilna, they teach a person how to learn, how a Jew is supposed to learn Torah. But in Mezrich, they teach how the Torah should teach a Jew, and the Jew should become a Torah himself. That's what the Alter Rebbe told him. When the Alter Rebbe started revealing the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the teachings of the Mezrich Magid, Reb Isaac and Naphtali distanced themselves from the Alter Rebbe, but with tremendous respect. They still had tremendous respect for the Alter Rebbe. But they didn't want to be too close. At the time that the Alter Rebbe used to give a shir in Liozne, a shir in Gemara, and he would learn together with his two brothers, Reb Yehuda Leib, three brothers, and Reb Mordechai and Reb Moshe. The Alter Rebbe used to teach them 3 times a week. He used to learn with them Gemara. Some of his brothers, by the way, learned in Vilna by the Vilna Goin. Yeah, sure, we read that before. But now when they came to Lozan, Alter Rebbe would learn with them. So Reb Isaac and Reb Naphtali used to join the learning. But when the Alter Rebbe started mamish making the Chadorim and teaching a lot of Hasidus, so at first they used to come into the Beis Medrash to discuss with the students of the Alter Rebbe different things in Gemara, in Nigla. When Alter Rebbe started teaching a lot of Hasidus, they again started keeping their distance. So they came close and then they went far away again. Now Reb Isaac and Naphtali were big Misnagdim against ideas of the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezrich Magid, but they tremendously respected the Alter Rebbe all the time. In the year Tov Kuf Lamed Tes, which is 8-9 years before this story happened, when they gave out a big excommunication, an Isur against the Alter Rebbe and against the teachings of Hasidus, from Slutsk, which is they had a big rabbinical court. Reb Isaac and Naphtali wrote a machor. What is it in English? They wrote a letter disapproving of the Isur they made against the Alter Rebbe. And they wrote to the Rabbanim in the Misnagdish city of Slutsk that the Alter Rebbe is a goin and a tzaddik. But to believe in miracles, Reb Isaac and Naphtali couldn't get themselves to believe in any of these things of miracles. They were too cold about this. Now this of Isaac, we're going back to the story that happened at Sukkot. Reb Pinchas Reizes is telling this. This of Isaac had a brother. I don't know if he was alive or not. And the brother had a son, so it's of Isaac's nephew. What was his name? This is Reb Pinchas Reizes telling. He became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, his nephew. His name was Reb Moshe Upzuger, from the city of Upzug, I guess. That year, Simchas Torah, Reb Moshe came to the Alter Rebbe for Simchas Torah. And who did he come with? 2 sons, we'll see their names later, and a son-in-law. And who do they stay by? You come to Crown Heights for Sukkot, wherever you find a place. So the nephew stayed by his uncle, Reb Isaac, who was a Misnagid, and the nephew was a Chassid. But Isaac allowed him to stay. He was a Machlis Orchid. He was a good Jew. Reb Moshe Upzuger was a weak person in general, and the traveling and the cold caused him terrible damage. He was lying in bed with high fever, and his sons and his son-in-law were also sick. They had a doctor in Liozne who ran around to all these people making house calls. His name was Reb Avrom the doctor. It's a real doctor story. And this doctor said that the young people, Reb Moshe's sons and son-in-law, and other young people who are very sick, he says, with Hashem's help, he knows that the Eibishter will help, they'll get up and get out of it. But Reb Moshe, he says, is older and a weak person, and he has piercing pain in both of his sides, and such high fever, and Reb Avram, the doctor, says he's doubtful if he will have enough strength to go through this. Reb Isaac was in great pain and distress, the uncle, Reb Isaac the Misnagid. And he complained to them, such behavior, to go meet your Rebbe, to go greet your Rebbe, is a mitzvah that comes through an Aveira. Today in the Tanya, by the way, in Chitas, The Alter Rebbe speaks about it. A mitzvah that comes from an Avera is a pretty nasty thing. It's not good. And that's what he was screaming at them. It's a mitzvah that comes through an Avera. Shmini Atzeres. After, that means Shana Rabbah at night, Friday night. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's actually Simchas Torah night, meaning Motzei Shabbos. I'm not sure. I always have this doubt. But whatever it was, before HaKofis, after Ma'ariv, it looks like it was the next night. Says that Pinchas raises myself and Ephraim Michal of Shklov and Chaim Eliyahu from Dubrovnik. We're going to try to remember some of the names, but Pinchas raises with a few young people started going around to different places that people were staying, what is it called, guest houses and houses that people were staying for Yom Tif, to call and to bring those who have to be brought and to tell everyone to come to Shul to HaKofis, to warm up and be healed with the Eish Das Lomei, with the fire of Torah. No, I said that. Alter Rebbe said, Eish Das Lomei, that means that one fire consumes, that's Eichla, consumes the other fire. The Alter Rebbe said that the fire of the Torah will take away the fire of the high fever. When we came to the hotels and motels and all these places, says Reb Pinchas raises, and we told everything that what Alter Rebbe said, the words of the Alter Rebbe were known all over Lezner already, from the night before, from the afternoon before. Yet, in other words, because when I came out from the Alter Rebbe's room and I went into Shul and told what the Alter Rebbe said about the sick people, the whole city of Lezner already knew about it within an hour. Yet, wherever I came, people wanted me to repeat the Alter Rebbe's words. It was a holy thing to them. And it was a real nachas ruach, says the Pinchas Reis, a joy to watch the great happiness that it caused, the words of the Alter Rebbe in every place we came. Even the wives and the little children became so happy because everyone was sure that the sick people will all have a refuah with Hashem's help. That night of HaKofis was a very, very stormy night. It was wet snow mixed with rain and a wind that went through the bones. In addition to that, the roads were all muddy. There was no paved roads in those days. So everything was muddy, so you had to crawl in the mud in this horrible weather. But this did not hold back anyone from coming to the shul of the Alter Rebbe. Many went by themselves and they needed only a little bit help. Many were carried on people's hands and shoulders to the shul because they couldn't walk. They were so weak from the fever. When we came to the home of Reb Isaac, says Reb Pinchas, we found Reb Isaac the Misnagdim having a debate with the sons of Reb Moshe and his son-in-law. They were screaming to Reb Isaac, we have to go and tell young people to come here to help us go to the shul of the Alter Rebbe for HaKofis. And our father should also be taken to HaKofis. And Reb Isaac the Misnagdim is standing there screaming at them, you're not allowed to go out in this weather outside. About your father, there's nothing to talk about. He's lying there like a log with high fever, and he doesn't know what's flying around him. He's like subconscious. And Avram, the doctor, said he's a chayla mesukin, God forbid. His life is in danger. And you want to take him outside? The smallest wind, screamed Reb Isaac at them, is going to cause him to pass over to the other world. When Reb Chaim Eliyahu of Dubrovnik, one of these young people that came with me, said Reb Pinchas, and another two in the light, and myself, came into the home of Reb Isaac, the place became so happy. The sons of Reb Moshe started screaming, Baruch Hashem, our father and we are all saved. And Reb Isaac is screaming back at them, murderers, killers, it's against the Holy Torah what you're doing. When I went over to Reb Moshe to look at him, says Reb Pinchas, I saw him lying like a log, black and blue by his eyes. His eyes are closed. No, black and blue, I don't know, maybe his face. His eyes are closed, high fever. I was shocked. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I was at a loss, he says. I didn't know what to do. And Reb Isaac, the Misnagdim, turns to me, says Reb Pinchas, and he says, what do you think? This chaylam is sucking, this dangerously ill person, they want to take him to shul for hakofas? Even in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, says the Gemara that not everyone had to go to Aliyah L'Regel, to the Yom Tov in the Beis Hamikdash to bring the karbanos. A person who couldn't walk, says the Gemara, didn't have to go. A person who was sick didn't have to go. And that was a mitzvah d'oraisa. This is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. If they take Rav Moshe outside, this is murder in the first degree, he said. And the sons of Rav Moshe are screaming back, if the Rebbe said it's a refuah, we believe with total emunah that the Rebbe is that there's gonna be a refuah shlema, it's gonna be a miracle for him. I must tell you, said Reb Pinchas Reis when he told the story, that during these few minutes, I didn't know what to say. I was confused. On one hand, I'm listening to Reb Isaac the Misnagdim's complaint, and I look at Reb Moshe lying there like a log, burning up in fever. On the other hand, I hear the young people, the sons of Reb Moshe, full of emunah, full of pure belief and trust in the Rebbe, simple Yingalite. They weren't big geniuses. And by them, they have the belief and faith in a tzaddik is so open, it's shining right through them to Mesiras Nefesh. And they don't even have to think about it. It's like automatic by them. The human intellect says that Reb Isaac is for sure correct. Reb Isaac the Misnagdim, a sick person like that, you're not allowed to move him from his place. And the smallest wind outside is a danger for him. And especially what's going on outside, the storm, they won't even bring him alive to shul. By the time he gets to shul, he won't be alive already, thinks Pinchas to himself. And that's the human intellect, seichel and nushi. But the godly intellect of the Nefesh Elikis says that Chaim and Baruch, the two sons of Rav Moshe, are right. If the Alter Rebbe said that the fire of Torah is a refuah, then it's a refuah, and you have to do it all the way to Mesiras Nefesh. From moment to moment, I got more and more nispol. I got more and more excited and affected by the wholeheartedness of the two sons of Rav Moshe. Simple Yungalite. And I remember until this day, says Reb Pinchas, 40 years later, the inner embarrassment that I had on myself. And this had such an effect on me. I decided right then and there, I have to go back to Yechidus to the Alter Rebbe. And I was thinking to myself in my mind, says Reb Pinchas, Pinya, that was his name, the son of Chanoich Shklover. His father was a genius, a chief of the Bezdin. I learned by all the Ge'oni Shklov, the great scholars of Shklov. I learned the whole Gemara, the Shas. I learned Shulchan Aruch. I learned Chakira. And how did I get to know the greatness of the Alter Rebbe? With intellect, through Torah, when I saw how great the Alter Rebbe is. And I'm already 8 years by the Alter Rebbe. And yet, my materialism overpowers my spirituality. And these simple Yungalite, who came to the Alter Rebbe not because of scholarly impressions, that they got impressed with the Alter Rebbe. No. They came because of Emunah Pshuta, Yireh Shamayim. And by them, the godly seichel, the godly intellect shines right out of them. And I said to myself in my mind, shame on you, Pinya, the son of Reb Henech. Be embarrassed for this simple village tailor who was one of the sons, and this other village businessman, the Hasidic ones who have such a munah pshuta in the Rebbe. I was so deep in thought, he says, I didn't feel what's going on around me. And suddenly Chaim Eliyahu of Dubrovna, this guy I brought with me, shoved me and said, Avram, the doctor said these are the last hours of Rav Moshe. I didn't have a chance to think, and I hear Baruch, the son of Rav Moshe, screaming to his father, Tate, father, the Rebbe sent messengers that you should go to Akofis. Wake up! We have to go to the Akofis of the Rebbe. And as he says it, I hear there's a whole tumult in the room where Rav Moshe is laying in bed. I ran into the room. I see Rav Moshe opened his eyes. His face is happy, and he's waiting for them to help him to go to the Akofis. Chaim Eliyahu ran out the room, and he called another few Yungalite, young men, strong men. Together they all dressed Rav Moshe in warm clothes because he had no strength to move a single limb of his body. And when the people took him on their hands, and they took him on their hands and carried him to the Alter Rebbe to shul for Hakofis. Says Reb Pinchas, when I walked into the Alter Rebbe's shul that night, the heat hit me in the face. The shul was packed. A part of the crowd was sick. Some were sitting there and on their hands. In other words, leaning their heads on their hands. Some didn't have the strength to sit. They were lying down on benches. But they were quiet at least. Others were coughing that without stop, he says. And others sighed that it broke your heart to hear them sigh. That's how sick they were. The most sick person, says Reb Pinchas, was a Yid called Reb Yaakov Yishaya Chatimsker. And this guy was a Kohen. He was 60 years old, a Ben Torah, a scholar, a Yid who davened the way he's supposed to, good midas, a kind person. He used to be a melamed very often, and he had his own inn where he used to, serve people. Reb Yaakov Yishaya used to give tzedakah, do achmas hasorchim. He was still around by the Mezritcher Magid, and he used to go by foot to Mezritch. And then when the Mezritcher Magid was nostalgic, he used to go to the Mendel Haradoker by foot. And when Mendel Haradoker went to Eretz Yisrael, he started going to the Alter Rebbe. He was one of the older Hasidim, a very intellectual Jew. And his friends called him Yaakov Yishaya the Kohen Gadol, because he was big and broad and strong. And Rabbi Avram, the doctor, said it's because he's strong that the illness got him so strong, he says. But he's Baruch Hashem, he said, B'li Ayin Hara, very strong, and he will beat the angel of death, he said, Rabbi Avram the Reifer. But right now, in shul, he's lying like a log, and it's scary to look at him, says the Pinchas Reizes. Now, what was the minhag of the Alter Rebbe by Simchas Torah or Shmini Atzeres? Again, I'm not sure what night this was. Is that they used to daven mincha? This is for sure Shmini Atzeres. Hoshana Rabbah, they used to daven mincha early, and at that time they used to daven in the Gan Eden HaTachton, small minyan for the Alter Rebbe, and already they felt the aura of happiness, getting ready for the Akofos, and the Alter Rebbe used to say a mimer for some of the chosen guests over there. And then they used to daven Ma'ariv in the Gan Eden HaTachton. That means a room next to the Alter Rebbe. It's a small minyan. Then the Alter Rebbe would say all the psukim about Torah, and he would say the 7 hakofos. He would do everything, the Alter Rebbe, together with the people that davened in the minyan. But he did it all. He said it all. By every hakofah, the Alter Rebbe would go from one corner, which is the same corner, southeastern corner, go around, and then he would come to the other side and put his hand on one of the chassidim, one of his talmidim, and he would dance with him. Whoever was zeicha to be by the Alter Rebbe, by these hakofos, seeing the holy face of the Alter Rebbe and listening to the happy nigunim, and seeing that the dancing of the Alter Rebbe with such joy, felt like they were in the Beis Hamikdash in the olden days. They used to call it the Yechidus hakofos of the Alter Rebbe. Why Yechidus? Because they said that over there was a revelation of the highest and deepest level of the neshama called Yechidah. Everyone knew that by the Alter Rebbe, that's what they felt. When the Alter Rebbe was doing the hakofos, it was like Lamaila, like in heaven, being the hakofos. Pinchas Reizes says, I remember the first, not everybody was invited. Every year was different people. If you were invited once, they didn't allow you to come again. The Alter Rebbe was very particular about these things. I remember the first time I was by the hakofos of the Alter Rebbe, says Reb Pinchas, it caused a revolution inside of me. I was completely transformed into a different person. Anyway, after that, the Alter Rebbe used to go into his room, and then they used to come out to the big minyan, the Alter Rebbe daven Ma'ariv, and join them for the hakofos together with everyone. That year, 1786, on Shmini Atzeres at night, again, I don't know for sure which night it was, but I think it was Shmini Atzeres at night. That year, there was something different. The Alter Rebbe went into the sukkah to make Kiddush, and he said that before he makes Kiddush, they should call 3 people, 3 Jungelite. One was called Michal Aaron of Vitebsk, Reb Shapsi Meir of Bechenkovich, and Reb Yaakov of Smilyan. Each one of them was a Kohen, one of them was a Levi, one of them was a Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe said to them, I need a Bezdin, a Jewish court, a tribunal it's called, I think, of 3 people, and I want it to be a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Here you should listen to my Kiddush, you'll be my Bezdin and my Shluchim, have the kavanas that I have, same intentions, and I want you to hear Kiddush from me. And the Alter Rebbe said they should bring wine. After Kiddush, Alter Rebbe took the leftover and mixed in more wine into the leftover. And he said to this Bezdin of three that he was giving them a special shlichus called the shlichus of healing, of refuah. Go into the Beis Medrash, he said, mix in more wine, and give it to all the sick people, and the Eibishter will help, and it'll be a refuah shlema for them. And then go to the ladies section and announce that any ladies who have a problem having children, or haven't had any children, or chas v'sholom lost their children, should also drink from this wine. Immediately, it became known to everyone that was there that whoever is going to drink the Alter Rebbe's Koshel Bracha will have a refuah shlema of all illnesses, and the women will be helped, those who need their children. The Bezdin of three, Rabbi Cholan, Rabbi Shabsimeir, Rabbi Yaakov Chasmilian, took a bunch of Yungalite with them. Here he mentions 20 names of Yungalite, who the Frierdiker Rebbe says that Pinchas said that their koyach, their strength, their muscle, always came before their intellect. Meaning they were strong before even thinking about it before. And these 20 Yungalite were asked by the Bezdin to help them, so there shouldn't be no pushing, and they should be able to give out the Koshel Bracha with a Seder. They came in the Bezdin to the shul and became completely quiet, because everybody knew already that they were the Bezdin to give out the refuah wine. They got up there, and Rabbi Yaakov Esmilian, the Yisrael, got up on the bima, and he made an announcement and said word for word what the Alter Rebbe said. And then when he finished, he said, what I told you now are the words we heard from our Rebbe. But I'd like to add a few words on my own, he said. It is a very known thing from older Chassidim, who got it from older Chassidim all the way back to the Baal Shem Tov Chassidim, that in order for a bracha to be mekuyim, meaning that the bracha is there, the check is there, but it should go into your account. In other words, you should have the bracha happen to you and fulfilled. There's two conditions. Condition number one, the person being blessed has to have faith in the tzaddik that the bracha is a bracha. And the second condition is that you have to be devoted to the tzaddik and do whatever the tzaddik asks you to do, whether it's how to serve Hashem or good midas or whatever. When they all heard it, the whole shul was so quiet, everyone heard every word of Rabbi Yaakov Smilian. But the people in charge decided, just in case somebody didn't hear it well enough, they took the Kohen, Rabbi Cholan, who had a voice, a thunderous voice, and he got up there and he said it over again, word for word, so everyone should hear it. Anyway, they gave out the wine to everyone, and when Alter Rebbe came to Akofis, Alter Rebbe said the psukim, and the next day, the whole Yosner was talking about the tremendous miracle that happened. And Avram the doctor, I'm almost finished. Avram the doctor said that by the older sick people, he said, this was Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. Because B'derech HaTeva, according to the medicine they knew in those days, it was beyond return. It was beyond Yush. There was no hope for them. And it was a ness above natural sources. The moifis, the miracle of Reb Moshe Apzuger, who became healthy, caused Reb Isaac, his uncle, the Misnagdim, to become a full-fledged chassid. And Reb Isaac used to say, that faith and trust in tzaddikim, the pure emunah that I saw by my nephew and great-nephews especially, Chaim and Baruch, was amazed me, he says. If I wouldn't see it with my own eyes, I would never, ever believe such a thing, he says. And Reb Isaac, by nature, was very diligent when it came to learning, and also used to like to go into every detail very deeply. So he started learning Hasidus, and every Hasidus the Alter Rebbe said, that Isaac used to review it many, many times till he knew it very well, and if he didn't understand something, he would ask until he understands it well. And so they gained a lot from him because he was able to explain the Chassidus. I thought I'll have time for more things, but this is the story before the Alter Rebbe accepted his Messias officially. Thank you very much, everyone.